My name is Vicki Sawicki, and I am the program coordinator of the North Country SISMA. So just a quick overview of what a SISMA is, if you don't already know. Uh-oh, how do I go to the next slide? Hang on. It doesn't like it. It's not liking this. Hang on. Why isn't it liking it? There we go. So invasive species. So there's challenges with invasive species, and that's kind of how the SISMA started, is by looking at, how invasive species don't respect, political boundaries. They don't respect property boundaries. So, between personal property and private property and public lands, invasive species don't care. They go everywhere. There were a lot of people, different organizations, have been trying to fight invasive species, but there's a lot of redundancy, or we just ran into this recently, and here we have this really good network with partnerships. We have over 200 partners, and we partner, thank God, with the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians, because we were planning and working the budget and have money from Eagle to go control European frogbit on what is in Manistee, Portage Lake. And then I got an email forwarded to me from somebody else from the Little River Band saying, we're contracting treatment of European frogbit on Portage Lake. And then I found out a third entity, the township, was also planning to do the same. So, we all might have shown up, but so that's where these SISMAs kind of help bring all of these things together so that you're not, tripping over each other. So it's kind of recognized that if we do a cooperative approach and bring all these parties together, we can maximize resources and get more done. So in 2014, these were the CWMAs or SISMAs across the Midwest and East. And you'll see Michigan didn't have full coverage. These were funded by the U.S. Forest Service that kind of established the first CWMAs, but they weren't really full-time. Like people, they didn't have, even at that time, very few of those SISMAs had enough money to have like a program coordinator and a strike team. So a lot of it was just like a part-time person or looking for other big grants. So a SISMA is a cooperative invasive species management area. In 2014, the DNR, the Michigan Invasive Species Grant Program, when they first got that pot of $3.6 million, the first year of it, one of their main priorities was to establish SISMAs throughout the state of Michigan. And so that's kind of where North Country SISMA came about through that funding from 2014. SISMA partners include nonprofits, academia, businesses, government, private citizens. We have county road commissions, we have tribes, we have school districts, like anybody who has a concern with any aspect of invasive species management or habitat restoration or habitat preservation are all basically part of the SISMA. And the important thing is, like, the SISMA is this group of all these entities, but that we recognize that each of our partners, they remain their own separate thing. So that's kind of how it is with the conservation districts. North Country SISMA actually partners with 5 conservation districts, and Mason Lake Conservation District is one of them. And so Bree, as an employee of Mason Lake Conservation District, is actually, they're handling HWA for the SISMA. So they're part of the SISMA, but they're actually a partner of the SISMA as well, if that makes sense. So as of 2019, these were the statewide SISMAs. Currently, there are 22 SISMAs. So that big one up around the Huron Pines and the big green one around Saginaw Bay, those both got split up into 2 for Huron Pines. And I feel like Saginaw Bay might be 3 now. I'm not sure. But we're this turquoise glob of 6 counties. So we cover Mason, Lake, Osceola, Mecosta, Wexford, and Missaukee. And here's some services that we provide in general, like plant ID. If somebody finds something that is acting aggressive and they think it might be invasive, or if they're just curious about something they found in nature, you can send me pictures. Anyone can send me pictures. You can text them to me at my phone number. If I don't know it, I know a lot of botanists who also know plants, so we'll figure it out usually. And then we provide invasive species instructions, and that can either be, verbally on the phone. I can talk people through things. We have some written instructions for some species. We do demonstrations if somebody really wants to control Japanese knotweed, but they don't have the confidence to get started on their own. We'll show up and we'll stand by their side and we'll walk them through the process, herbicide safety and the whole shebang, mixing chemicals so they can do it on their own. And we also have educational YouTube videos that are about 2 minutes each. And a lot of them are specific to specific species if you want to know how to control them or know how to prioritize their treatment. Of course, people can always call me if they need more advice. And we also have the strike team for hire. So that's where our crew does control at cost on high priority species in the region. So to give you an idea of what we did in 2022. So these are all the counties we cover and all the different field work we did. And if you'll notice, Mason County, we did, quite a bit of work in Mason County. Strike team for hire, we had 12 jobs covering 18.5 acres. The CRC strike team jobs, some of our county road commissions pay us to do some roadside control. So Mason County Road Commission pays us to do all of the roadside wild parsnip control, mostly because they had volunteers out doing mechanical control of stuff on the road, not knowing that was wild parsnip, and the people all came back with horrible burns. So now the county pays us to do those. And we did 1,109 acres of survey this past year. Some of those were in recognized threatened or imperiled habitats. And that's kind of how we wound up finding the Tree of Heaven and doing some work on the park property there. And then we also did, surveys of ORV trails. We're surveying for European frogbit in lakes. Lincoln River is the only occurrence we found in Mason County. We did Little Manistee River surveys with the Little Manistee River people. I can't remember what they call their organization. We did, I think, 26 linear miles of survey on the Little Manistee River this past year. The Forest Service paid us to do that. And we're trying to figure out the funding to do the portions upstream of the navigable, of the kayakable sections of the Little Manistee that would involve surveying on foot. But the challenge is it doesn't run through Forest Service land. So we got to figure out who's going to pay us to do that. Sometimes we have to scramble to get money to figure out, we know what we want to do, but we can't just do it because everything's kind of tied to grant deliverables. So, people report to Mason and they wonder why we're not doing anything. And really there's like a 2-year lag between getting a good idea and getting it funded. Some other things in Mason County that we've been doing. This is a partnership with the Ludington DPW and a few friends of the environment of the world. So if you're familiar with Cartier Park, the section between the dog park and the gazebo, we've kind of chosen that as a showplace for restoration and control. We killed a lot of Tree of Heaven, a lot of Oriental bittersweet, and the DPW staff took down those big Tree of Heaven and chipped them for us. And then we planted over 600 wildflower plugs. And I feel like there were like 66 native trees and shrubs that we planted in that area. And then we also put in interpretive signs to talk about the work there and what's good about it and what's bad about invasive species. And this was all funded by the U.S. Forest Service as well. And then another big thing we've been doing in Mason County, we've been partnering with Paramarquette Township to do work on their conservation park. So if you haven't been out to Conservation Park, you would realize that its name is not exactly accurate right now. It's Hot Mess of Invasives Park, but we're working on it. So basically this road that currently it's called Hall Road, even though we've recommended that they rename it Conservation Way. Last year we did 2 days with their DPW staff where they drove their bushwhacker and one of our guys followed behind with herbicide because that's all autumn olive just lines that whole road. And so it's a good way, quick way to get rid of a bunch of autumn olive. And so we'll be doing that again this year. The Paramarquette Township is contributing $5,000 a year to fund us to do that. But then we also have some funding from the Forest Service that is allowing us to do Tree of Heaven and Oriental Bittersweet work at their park. We also do a ton of outreach. So this isn't separated by county. This is pretty much what we did in all of 2022. We get interviewed by Steve Ruba a lot. So the interviews for radio, I mean, it's Steve Ruba, that's an easy grant deliverable. I love that. So I don't know, the volunteer work days, probably Sarah's going to talk about that. Part of that is just our coming out and helping the group of few on their daytime work days at Cartier Park. Okay, so then again about our YouTube channel, I'm asking you to subscribe and follow. We now have 79 followers. For some reason, we set a goal of 100 and we're not there yet, but we do, these are our actors, actually. They actually do a lot of things for us, but believe it or not, we had competition for the role of Swamp Thing. I had to audition, guys, because everybody wanted to be Swamp Thing. It's absolute madness. So the videos are kind of funny a little bit because they have these characters in them. But like I said, they're about two minutes long. And they really, I really think every one of them really empowers you to do the work that they claim they're going to. So we have ones on how to control Phragmites, autumn olive, Japanese knotweed, spongy moth, Oriental bittersweet. Then we have one on herbicide safety. Our video on life cycle of spongy moth. To other people, they might not think that it is viral, but to us, it's like, I don't even know, 2.2, whatever. It's a lot. It's a lot. I can't think of the number. It's a lot of people have watched it. And then we have a video on ID and avoiding European frog bit spread. And that's where Swamp Thing came in, and it is honestly hilarious. So I recommend you check out our videos. They're not only educational, but they're entertaining and fun, I think. So this is the map from Misson of Ludington State Park. So this is what we know about what's at and around Ludington State Park as far as invasives. To me, all that lime grass on the shoreline dunes is a problem, and baby's breath is a problem on those shoreline dunes. So that worries me just because I know there's pitcher's thistle there, and that is a federally endangered species. And the Tree of Heaven that we treated, which is on the south end of the park, just off park property, I think it might be, or it might be on the park property, but that was very near to where we found some pitcher's thistle. So I know that there's pitcher's thistle throughout that area and on that shoreline. So those things concern me. The Oriental bittersweet is not, ideal. And then quite a bit of frag on, small little water bodies. So outside of the park, we have treated frag. So the ones that are circled in red are Phragmites that we've treated mostly with the cost share program or some other program, but I think they're mostly with the cost share program with Hamlin Lake Preservation Society matching funds for their members on that. And then also there is some Japanese knotweed on the road leading into the park. And I think we just talked to you guys at our meeting about treating that. So we put that on our list for this year. We will be treating that Japanese knotweed. There is no Japanese knotweed as far as we know on park property as of yet. That's all I have. So I don't know if anybody has questions or.
I could probably, if you put that map back up, I could talk a little bit about some of those that I hadn't planned on including in my part of the conversation. But,
okay. Let's see. Uh-oh. It's not liking me. Hang on. There we go. And I do. Give me a second. Bear with me. There we go.
All right. So I'm curious, and this is just because I haven't gone in to Misson and looked at these individual points, but the lime grass, I know we had plotted a lot of those points probably 8 years ago or so. And then when the water levels came up, and we did treat them, by the way, we had a contractor come out and do the treatment. And then when the high water levels came up, it unfortunately washed away, and which could lead to it being spread to other locations. So I was just curious about that. And then I did also want to let you know that we do contract each year to treat the Phragmites. That's something that's been ongoing for probably 10 years now. Each year in the fall, we have someone come out and do the treatments. We've seen a lot of those patches reduced in size, which is a really positive thing, but they're stubborn, and a lot of those have held on. But I did want to make sure that you knew that we were at least trying on those couple of items to make sure that we get on top of them.
Yeah, that is good to know. So maybe I'll look at what the dates were on those reports of lime grass and see if they're recent reports, or because the water was not last year, was it? The year before it was bad.
Yeah, I guess it was a year before is when, but even prior to that, a couple of years before, I went out with all those survey points to double check them and wasn't finding any lime grass at that time.
Oh, well, that's great.
It's good, other than the fact that it probably means that it's floating around somewhere and could be landing on the shores. So,
Not much we can do about Lake Michigan.
yeah.
It does its own thing, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, that's all. I just wanted to touch on those two particular items.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's awesome. I'm glad you're treating the frag, because that was I was surprised to see so much frag, but so maybe there's a lot less. So we might want to just go to let Misson know if the stuff's gone. We have the ability to mark it as not present, and they'll remove it from their inventory so that we have a more accurate map of things. So that might be something we can look at this year. Because we do have a parks grant that we're spending down this summer.
So we want to transition to Bree, AKA Danny's computer or account.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to say I am not Danny McGarry. I work for Danny McGarry. My name is Bree Jasinski. I'm the HWA project manager at the Mason Lake Conservation District. So Vicky kind of mentioned that. So we are taking over and doing all the work for the SISMA dealing with HWA. And that's partly because Vicky and her crew is really far inland in Cadillac, and they've got a ton of work, as you guys just saw. So we're taking over the HWA portion since we're a little closer to the lake where HWA is a problem. So I will share my screen. All right. And I think I can slideshow. Okay. Is that working? Okay. All right. So yeah, I manage all the hemlock woolly adelgid work in Mason County. And we also deal in Lake County, but HWA doesn't spread that far inland. I'll go over that a little bit later. But I just wanted to go over a few things. So HWA is in the state park. So part of that is the reason why I want to go over some of this, so you guys know kind of what we're doing in the area to assist with that. So I'm going to go over some ID characteristics, some different survey locations that we've treated in, and then treatments. All right, so I don't know how many of you know what HWA is, but I'll just go over it a little bit. So it's a very, very tiny little insect. It's invasive. It was found in Michigan in about 2015, and it's been spreading up the coast from Ottawa County. You can see there in that bottom middle image, that is actually what a crawler adelgid looks like. So they're about the size of a flake of pepper. They're really teeny. And they're a sucking insect. So they basically crawl around, insert their mouth parts at the base of a needle and suck all the nutrients from the tree. And they're very specific to eastern hemlock. So yeah, you can see here in this top image, they're very, very tiny. But then they make these white fluffy egg sacs during the winter. And you can see in that egg sac just how many eggs there are. So that's one of the reasons why they spread so quickly. But we use these egg sacs to basically identify an infestation. So this is some of the damage that HWA causes to eastern hemlock, and it will kill a tree within about 4 to 10 years after infestation, depending on how healthy the tree was before that. You can see here on this left side, this is a branch that has probably been infested with HWA for a few years, and you're beginning to see needle yellowing, dieback, and eventually you'll see whole branch dieback and eventual tree death. So in the center here, this is kind of a cool image. So there's a road down the center and all the trees on the left side, those were treated actually by Ottawa Conservation District a little further south. And then on the right side of the screen, all those trees were untreated. And you can really see a pretty stark difference in how much that treatment actually helped the hemlocks in that area. So here's some survey data. We do detection surveys on private properties, all in Mason County. And our grant basically funds us to do that. We'll send out a mailer and we'll go walk people's properties and look for HWA if that's something they're interested in. So we surveyed about 3,000 acres last winter, and everything in green here is a property that we surveyed. So we're even getting pretty far north here. We don't do surveys on the state park or in the forest, national forest, just north of Hamlin Lake. So that's why you're not seeing any points there. But I know that there's a lot of detection surveys being done in those areas as well. So we focus mostly within about 5 miles of the lake and upriver corridors. And this is partly due to temperature. Adelgids can't survive very cold temperatures, so cold snaps inland really help keep them down. They're very, very tiny, and so they're very easily spread by wind. They can be picked up in bird feathers and moved to different trees that way. Deer can also move them. We've found some trees along deer trails that are infested. Also hikers and different RVs and vehicles can move it as well. So if you're a avid hiker, avid camper, it's a good idea, especially if you're going south, when you come back north, it's a good idea to either wash your car off, or just make sure that you're not parking underneath or near any hemlocks. So this is the current extent of HWA in Mason County, and this was as of December 1st, 2022. So Mason County is the furthest north that it's gotten so far. And you can see the points in the state park where they're doing some treatments as well. But we are detected all those points in the private area. So all those red points are where we detected HWA during our surveys. And up north by Hamlin Lake, those infestations are still relatively light and pretty spotty. So it's nice to be catching those early so that we can treat them and hopefully, eliminate and slow the spread there. So just because I figured a lot of people in this organization probably know people in the area, we're looking to get a hold of people in these areas, and we've already gotten a hold of some people because we send out mailers. But if anyone in the area of Piney Ridge Road or West Davis Road, north of Hamlin Lake, or just anywhere really kind of in the vicinity of Hamlin Lake, is interested in seeing if they're very close to an infestation, then they can just go ahead and contact me. All right, so this is what we do when we do find a positive on someone's property. All the hemlocks within about 800 feet of that tree get tagged and they get treated in the summer under a grant. So we do a trunk injection or a basal bark spray for really small trees. And that protects the tree for about 4 to 7 years. So it'll kill off all the existing indulgids within about maybe a year, year and a half, and then it'll protect it for another 4 to 7. So this is our mapping system over here on the right. These red dots in the center, those were the trees that we initially found with HWA on them during a detection survey. And then all of these green points around it, those are all trees that were tagged and will be treated in the summer. And those, since they're green, they were not found to have HWA. So hopefully we can, when we come back and treat this point in the summer, that will kind of eliminate this infestation is the idea. So just so you can see how many trees we're treating. These are our treatment stats from last summer. We're currently a crew of 3. We treated about 334 acres, 50 parcels, 6,105 trees, and about 32,500 inches DBH, which is the diameter at breast height. And that basically is just how many inches across a tree is. So this summer, we're going to be a 4-person crew, and we're hoping to treat around 10,000 trees or so in Mason County around infestations. And like I said, we're a lot of those around Hamlin Lake are pretty light so far. So we're pretty excited to treat those and hopefully slow the spread in our county. Here's some photos of our crew, and also there's a turkey there in the center who we ran across under a hemlock tree during treatment season. So we came back a few weeks later to treat that tree. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, Julia Chambers. I had never heard about being careful to make sure they're not on your shoes or on your car. And
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
that a
so
new thing that's coming out, or?
it's
just-
something that we try to just promote to people with outreach. At least our crew has to be very careful during crawler season, and if more people were aware, it would you know, be helpful, and definitely helpful for people to not bring it back to their own properties. So yeah, I think on your shoes, you probably don't have to worry quite as much. But if you are in a really infested area, like some of the areas further south, there's some parks there. If you're hiking through hemlocks and being touched by a lot of hemlocks, especially during the crawler season peaks about May to June, I would just be careful coming back to your own property to make sure that you're not, immediately hiking past your own hemlocks.
Well, what would you look for?
So you can't really see the adelgids, is the hard thing. So like what we do to clean off our clothes is we'll basically just at the end of the day, we'll run all our clothes through the dryer, and that'll do it.
Okay.
So yeah, I would, make sure that you're not, if you're really worried, I would make sure just to throw your clothes in the dryer, and then they're safe to wear again.
Because we have, my husband's from Holland, so we go down there to babysit and stuff like that, the granddaughter, and we go
Mhm.
hiking out there, and it's like, oh, it's a pretty bad area down there too.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too worried if you're on trails, but if you are getting like all up in the hemlocks, I
Mhm.
might, throw your hat in the dryer or something.
The other thing, I talked to Steve Ruba today, Vicki, briefly. He asked me about what they're doing in Grand Haven. They have like Adopt a Hemlock program, and you can pay $15 or something like that, and you watch it, you take care of this hemlock and make sure. He goes, wow, what about you getting something like that? And I go, well, I can look into it, but I'll talk to the experts on that. But Have you heard about that at all? That it like adapt a hemlock or anything like that in Grand Haven?
Yeah, I don't know
think I
who's
had.
doing that. Yeah.
I know that, like Josh Shields would do, a tree, where you kind of adapt a tree and just kind of watch it and make sure it's
Well, they have
doing okay.
the Eyes on the Forest program.
Yeah, that's what it is.
That still
Yeah.
exists, and I think HWA is probably one of those things you can watch for through
Mhm,
that program. So that's on Missing if you want to adopt a tree that way. But if
mhm.
people are paying $15 for the privilege of keeping
Yeah,
an eye on
it's-
a tree, that sounds like some kind of trick that some smart.
yeah, it sounds kind of weird. I mean, it's good to adapt a tree and take care, watch it, but yeah, it's like, yeah, anyway.
I know the Muskegon River Watershed Assembly is, if people give them $99, they will plant a baby tree somewhere. They're gonna plant the trees anyways, but now they're getting $99
Wow.
for each one.
We should do that, Sarah, for a fundraiser.
Just as long as they don't want a plaque by each tree, that's. what-
Yeah, right. Yeah, the plaque might cost that much, huh?
Is there any
Mm.
preventive measurement that a homeowner could do to like put something down like type of chemical that will absorb in the roots to prevent it if it's in the area where you live, but you don't have it in your trees yet?
Yeah, so the chemical that we use, it is a preventive chemical as well. But I really wouldn't recommend putting it on your trees until it's either very close or you know that you have it. It's a really expensive chemical. And also we usually, like, the method that we use is tree injection and basil bark spray. And we don't do the soil drenches that are really popular and cheaper, just because the soils here are pretty sandy. So you just are, there's more potential for leachage, I guess, leaching.
Jim, do you want to share your slides and talk further?
I just had one more question.
All right. Okay.
What's keeping it from moving east?
Yeah,
It's-
so it's mostly temperature at this point. Yeah, so at about -5 degrees Fahrenheit, you start seeing some die off of HWA, and then at about -20, it'll just like kill just huge swaths of it. But along the lakeshore, it really doesn't get that cold ever. So, and also there's a lot more hemlocks along the lakeshore, and just a lot more movement of bird migratory pathways and things like that. So less risk inland, not no risk, but less. So.
Jim, do you want to talk more in terms of the state park before
Yeah, can you
Sarah?
see the screen now or no? Let me, great presentation, Bree. I'd get to skip over some of the stuff now that you gave a good description of what the adelgid actually is. But yeah, let me share my screen and then I will bring up my presentation. Okay, is that visible now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, that's what I was going to start off our conversation about was HWA. This was something that was brought into the state probably I think in 2015 was when the first infestation was noticed, and that was in, I believe, the Ottawa or Allegan County area. It was brought in with nursery stock from out of state. There's HWA is quite prevalent in the Appalachian region. You look in Pennsylvania, you go down to the Smoky Mountains, you'll see a lot of devastation caused by HWA. So in addition to, being able to be moved through birds, migration, the fact that, RVs can cause it to move after brushing up against it, the nursery stock is another issue. So we do have quarantines in place, but, those aren't always followed. And I think that's what happened. I think our quarantine was in place for bringing in hemlock, I think, starting in 2001. And even with that being the case, it was brought in. Until recently, this map here kind of shows you a little bit about the, kind of shows you the range of the infestations along our side of the coastline. Up until, the beginning of the year, we would say that Ludington State Park and Mason County, those were pretty much at the northern limit of HWA, but in late January, an infestation was found on a country club up in Benzie County, between Crystal Lake and Lake Michigan up there. So because of that, we're kind of expanding our surveying of these areas. We have a lot of state forest campgrounds that are in Manistee County and Benzie County. Some of those have good hemlock populations as well. So we're starting as a state, starting to do more survey work up there. We suspect that if it's in Benzie County, it's probably in Manistee County as well. So for, this is just a kind of a rehash of what, or a recap of what we're doing here in the state park system as a whole before we get to Ludington State Park. We've got 8 state parks right now that are all along Lake Michigan that have HWA present. It started off at Hoffmaster in 2017, and then Ludington got its first infection in 2020. So following that first detection in Hoffmaster State Park, Parks and Rec Division, their stewardship section, put together a forest health crew based out of Muskegon State Park. And this is through the AmeriCorps program, which is kind of like it's a domestic version of the Peace Corps, often focuses on work out in the forests, wildlands, more of a lot of environmental programs. It's a good program. It provides funding, through wages while they're doing their work, but also provides funding for college education if they decide to go on to college or trade schools. So we've got this crew that's working out of Muskegon State Park, and they've been surveying all of the parks along the shoreline, any state-owned lands within Parks and Rec Division. And this is all funded through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. Our Recreation Passport dollars also help with that, and the Michigan Invasive Species Grant Program. So, and just to add to that, just recently, the program was expanded and we were able to add one AmeriCorps member to Ludington State Park specifically, based out of our park. That started in, I think, November of 2022. So Russell Lux, he's worked here for a couple of years as a summer ranger, pivoted over into that role. And he's been out doing a lot of surveying and he just passed his herbicide license test. So he now has an herbicide license. And so he'll be out doing treatments as well. And then I just found out today, as I was preparing this program, that they're looking to fund another position here at Ludington State Park specifically for HWA. And some of that is so they can kind of continue to help survey north of here, Orchard Beach State Park in Manistee County, and the state forest campgrounds that are a little bit further to the north. So we're really excited to hear about that. So this map here shows Ludington State Park and points out the areas that have been surveyed, which is going to be what you see in the green. These are all areas that where hemlock is present, and then the red spots, those are the areas where we have identified. I take that back. I'm sorry. The white spots are areas that we've identified hemlock woolly adelgid. First detected in October of 2020. Everything that was found then was treated. In 2021, there were a few more trees. Total of actually 36 trees were detected in all of 2021. And then this last year in 2022, we had an additional 86 trees detected, and treatment will take place on those this upcoming season. So this kind of shows a map of our untreated trees right now on the left-hand side of the screen, those red dots with the yellow circles. You can see that we have another 86 trees here. And at the southern range of the stretch of state parks, at least, that have HWA, there's been a significant increase at Saugatuck Dunes as well. So it's definitely spreading. Fortunately, we're going to be getting a little bit more help as we try to address the HWA. So I'm just showing this picture here. This is Interlochen State Park. We don't actually have a photograph of the hemlock that I'd like to point out, but hemlocks are very valuable as a habitat. They provide cooling of streams. You'll often find them along rivers, provide shade for wildlife, food sources. Deer in the winter will often use them as deer yards to lay down during the winter months. They tend to be a little bit warmer in the winter than surrounding forests, and the snow, the fact that they're so big and bushy tends to limit the amount of snow that makes it down to the ground. So they're important from that, but it's also, there's some impressive trees. I mean, I think hemlocks are my favorite of all trees. They're just beautiful. And this survey work that we're doing is helping to protect, all of these trees, whether the small 4-inch, 7-inch trees, up to some of these larger trees that we have in Ludington State Park. One of the trees that we found in the park, or was found during the natural features inventory, was a hemlock that was 340 years old, estimated. So when you think about that, that puts it back to the time of Louis XIV. And when the French were just starting to explore this area that, later became Michigan. So, these are incredible trees, long lasting trees, and we want to do our best to protect them and save them. So right now, the survey work is primarily in these 8 state parks where it's been identified, though we just recently, last week, started doing some survey work in Orchard Beach State Park in Manistee. There aren't many hemlocks there, but we want to do our due diligence in checking that area out. Earlier, you may have seen that number that said that there were 36,000 acres of state park land that we were concerned about. And that's just based on all of the state parks that are along the Lake Michigan shoreline within a 5-mile buffer zone. Because as Bree mentioned, once you get inland, we think they're less likely to survive. So we're focusing our efforts in those warmer areas along the shoreline for the winters. On the right-hand side of the map, that is a map showing the route of our surveyors. They have covered, I think, 26,000 acres of coverage in Ludington State Park. So, Ludington State Park's 5,300 acres, probably 1,500 to 2,000 of those acres contain hemlock and are being surveyed heavily. And, they've gone over that 4 or 5 times almost in time. The crew itself regularly walks, they walk 2,000 to 5,000 miles a year, which is pretty incredible. And on average, about 17,000 miles per year total. So that's Lansing to LA 4 times. So they're on the ground a lot. They're doing a lot of survey work, which is really helping us identify the HWA trees, infected trees, and helping to treat those as well. So that's kind of all I have on the HWA right now. I think we'll have more information now that we have we'll soon have 2 dedicated AmeriCorps workers working in this area. Another subject that I wanted to talk about a little bit is our garlic mustard. We've got a few patches of garlic mustard along the Piney Ridge Road area primarily. There's a small patch as well just north of the lake on Piney Ridge Road. This was detected probably in 2010 by Dave Dister when he was doing a plant survey in this area. A lot of you might know Dave from his work, whether it's birding or working with a few. But we've had volunteers and the stewardship staff and our park staff working on pulling garlic mustard each year since 2011. We've noticed some changes in the prevalence. We've noticed some improvement. Some of the areas, like at the 90-degree turn on Piney Ridge Road and just north of the lake, have decreased significantly. The patch that's at the north end of Piney Ridge Road near one of the parking areas, that one's been pretty stubborn, and we haven't been able to make a huge dent in it. We thought we were making progress and then saw kind of a jump again in the population of garlic mustard at that particular lot. This upcoming year, June 3rd, we do have a stewardship work bee to work on pulling garlic mustard at these different locations. Emily Leslie is our stewardship specialist out of Lansing that works on these volunteer work bees. So if you're interested in that, just keep an eye on the Friends of Ludington State Park newsletter, or you can go to the website to learn more about that activity. Japanese barberry is another plant that we spend a lot of time on. It doesn't seem to be as tenacious as a lot of the other invasives that we've been dealing with, but it's very widespread in the park. We first started working on this in 2014. We picked a patch of Japanese barberry on the south side of the Big Sable River. It's kind of almost like a bowl, old dune that had an incredible patch, 100 yards long by about 100 feet wide, extremely dense. And that was our first invasive plant treatment work bee that we had with the Friends of Ludington State Park. We had about 15 people come out there. We use the cut and stump treatment with herbicide. So we've got volunteers who are out there nipping off the tops of the barberry. And then those of us who have herbicide licenses will apply that herbicide to the stumps. Typically, we need to do that outside of the spring season because as the sap is flowing, the treatment doesn't seem to be as effective. And so we usually try to schedule something in the summer. And again, we do a lot of work in the winter months on treatment. And we've been doing quite a bit of treatment this year. Mostly our lead ranger, Paul Klein, leads these work bees. Our seasonal rangers help. And then we've had our summer ranger, Levi Wilson. He's been volunteering once a week on treating barberry with Paul as well. So they're making a pretty big dent. Right now, they're mostly focusing in the southern dunes because there are a lot of new patches that we have not treated yet. But then we're also continuing, if I zoom in a little bit closer, this kind of focuses more on those. We're also working on an area along Piney Ridge Road. That one's not as dense, but it's more spread out, but it's been quite persistent. So we've been treating that. Some of the patches along the south ski trails and along the dune ridge between the forest and the open dunes near the Lake Stride path of the Piney Ridge Trail. Those are getting their first treatments. And then for quite a few years, we've had a stubborn patch at the Beechwood campground entrance and some of the areas south of the dam we're hitting again. Usually, once after we go in there and we do a treatment, we've got a few years to, kind of take a break, and then a lot of the seeds that are already on the ground start sprouting out, and we need to go back in there and do it again. So that's what we're working on with the Japanese barberry right now. I'm going to talk a little bit about the beech leaf disease, which it started, you may have seen some information about this in the news. It has started making its way into Michigan. This is, it's bad enough that we got hit with beech bark disease first. We were the first one in the state. We don't want to have beech leaf disease again. And this is a disease that's caused, I guess they can't really say it's caused by yet. They know that in conjunction with a certain nematode, they find that in and around those areas where beech trees are infested or infected, I'm sorry. It causes some leaf curl, striping on the beech trees, and decline, yellowing of the leaves as well. The reason that we're really concerned about this is, you might remember a few years ago, we had a really nice success story when we planted over 200 beech bark disease resistant beech trees, small saplings. And that was done with Friends of the Ludington State Park helping out, and a lot of volunteers from the community. And what we're hoping is, what they did was they took beech trees that we noticed were naturally resistant in the park and at other locations. And the U.S. Forest Service was working on coming up with a hybrid that would be resistant. The hope was to plant these here, start getting those out into the forest. And, within 30, 35 years, we'll see how successfully they resist beech bark disease. Unfortunately, beech leaf disease was found in Delaware, Ohio, which was the site where these beech trees were grown. So we haven't had any verified sightings of beech leaf disease in the park, but because of the potential for contamination with this nursery stock that we thought was going to save our beech forests, now, having been, grown in those areas, we're very closely monitoring that. And usually a couple times a year, I go out and, because I know where all of these trees are located, take samples, and we send them to the lab and check for any genetic identifiers of those nematodes to see if we can stay on top of that. So it's not here yet, but it is something that we definitely are concerned about, and want to make sure that we can get on top of it if it does show up here. But so far, we've, after 3 years of testing, we haven't had any signs of it. So You know, this is a photograph here, wasn't taken at the park or in Michigan, taken down in Cleveland. We had a lot of our rangers from various parks and head down to Cleveland so they could do some work, you know, learning how to identify beach leaf disease so that when they're out in the park, they can identify it if they see any signs of it. So you notice here, there's some of that dark banding on the leaves themselves. And that's what you would be looking for, mainly looking from underneath up into the canopy, you'll see that. And, you know, I guess I'll just end this section here on just, you know, what you can do to help. We do have the volunteer work bees. We're going to be doing the garlic mustard one in early June 3rd. We're also planning on doing a couple of additional Japanese barberry treatments in the park. That'll take place probably in July or August. We're still working on that. We'll share that information with everyone on the Friends group page. You can also use the online missing reporting tool to report any suspected invasive species that you find out, you know, out in the woods when you're out in the park, or, you know, even on private land. Once you post that there, they're usually verified by someone who knows what they're looking for. Another option is to download that app on your phone because it makes it a little bit easier to get GPS coordinates and upload that to the missing website. So that's all I have. Very good.
Thank you, Jim.
Any
Can we,
questions?
yeah, I was gonna say any questions, but also, Sarah, do you want to get ready to share your screen?
Yep. You know, Jim, I was just wondering about the garlic mustard. Is that all mechanically pulled, or is some of that being done with chemicals?
That's all mechanically pulled. And, you know, we've been pretty fortunate so far that we've been able to stay on top of it. We get out there before, you know, it's gone to seed and do as much pulling as possible. It has stayed really close to the road. It has not spread it even along those trails. You know, I would say probably within 6 to 8 feet of the road is where we see it, at least at that north end of Piney Ridge. Yeah, but we've just been doing all handfuls. But it's a pretty big battle because if you go across the street along Piney Ridge Road, I'll admit that a couple of us have done, you know, some road pulling over there with permission of the landowners, but, you know, off of park property just to try to stay on top of it. And I think we got 11 garbage bags full of garlic mustard off of private property. You know, it's hard to stay on top of it when you have it right across the road. Garlic mustard isn't going to respect those boundaries.
Okay, I guess I'll go get started. My name is Sarah Boland, and I am on the board with a few. And just going to talk a little bit about the program that we do that's at Cartier Park and dealing with invasive species and the partnerships that we've just developed over time. Okay, so basically the program that we have going on there started back in 2018. And Kathy Winchesky, who is on the city council, she was also on the board of a few friends. And she approached the friends and the city about starting a program and dealing with invasive species that were taking place in that park. And both organizations decided that this was definitely a good idea. I've only been involved in the program for about 4 years. In the last couple of years, I've gotten a little bit more involved with helping Kathy with the program. We also work with Dave Dister, who is a local botanist, and he's also a bird expert in all of our eyes, and the author of Birds of Mason County, Michigan. We also really depend a lot on volunteers to help us out with the program. Obviously, the more volunteers we have, the more things that we can get done on our 2-hour sessions that take place throughout the spring, summer, and fall. We've also worked with some local businesses that have helped out, kind of came out and did like a 2-hour session with their employees coming out, almost like a team development program, and also gave them an opportunity to do some volunteerism and learn a little bit more about the invasive species program. In addition to that, of course, we have a great relationship working with the city since it is their park. So we work with them, and we have some daytime sessions in the mornings where they're able to send out a couple of people to help out some of their employees, which works out really well. Same thing with Vicky's group with North Country SISMA. They send out, a couple of staff members that can help out with us. And also, what's great about when they come out is they can also get some training and information to not just our volunteers, but also ourselves. So we always really appreciate that. And then, of course, also we do work with the Mason County Conservation District. So basically, the way we have the program set up, originally, they were meeting just once a month. And we started a couple of years back, changing that to 2 times a month, mainly because, we found out that we weren't able to accomplish a whole heck of a lot by just coming out once. And so we went ahead and added that second day during the month. So we're doing the second Tuesdays at 10 a.m., fourth Tuesdays at 6 p.m. And that kind of works out really well with getting the volunteers, because obviously we have some people that can't make it in the mornings and some can't make it in the evenings. So it just kind of opens it up and gives us an opportunity to get more people out there. This year, we're going to do a couple of things a little bit different. Dave Dister, who I mentioned, is a botanist. He's going to be doing a spring and a fall tour of Cartier Park and what we've got going on in there. He's going to be identifying not just the invasive species, but also the native plants in there. I mean, there's quite a few natives that have been growing there forever. And so he's going to be pointing those out, and also on the invasive side, talking about, what people can do on their own property to try and combat those types of issues. In addition to that, the program that Vicki mentioned with regards to all the major things that they did in Cartier Park, as far as removing all the invasives in that area that's to the east of the gazebo, we're going to be really trying to concentrate on that quite a bit and see that we spend a ton of time in there so that we hopefully can help for all those plants they put in there, that they have a much better chance of surviving if we can work on getting additional invasives out of there. The other area that they planted a bunch of plants is around the gazebo itself. And we're hoping to go ahead and see if we could get maybe a couple of people that, be willing to kind of dedicate their time to working on that. That doesn't even necessarily have to be when we're doing the Tuesday sessions, but they can come out whenever they want, just to keep that area weeded. And once again, to give them as much chance to survive as far as those natives. We have on our website, on our event schedule, we have a list of all these different activities that we have going on over here at Cartier Park, plus other things going on with a few. So you can visit that website, and gives you an idea of what plants we're actually identifying and working with for the different dates. And also gives you some information as far as what you should wear and stuff for your own personal safety. And on top of that, I do have an email list, and I've got quite a few people that are on there. So as people come to these sessions, we have them sign in and provide an email address if they're not already in our system. And then I send out a reminder a couple of days before, just to let them know what we're working on. And, once again, give them whatever information necessary if we need tools or anything, so that they're prepared for that day. So if anybody's interested in that, you can just drop me an email at sarahb@afew.org. And I also use that list. So if we end up with inclement weather, I'll go ahead and send out an email the day of, just to let people know that we're having to cancel or something else changes with the schedule. And that's mainly all I have about Cartier Park. And now I wanted to just say a few things about a few and these upcoming events that we have in April. April is going to be a pretty busy month for us, and starting actually with this week, we have a presentation coming up on Thursday. We have Cheryl Gross coming in from Planet Wild, who's going to talk about native plants and what's the best type of things to have in your landscape. And that's going to be a really good presentation. We've already got 35 people that have signed up for that. And that's going to be taking place here at the Lakeshore Resource Network. And we do ask that people do register in advance, so we have an idea of how many people are coming, so that we're set up properly for that. We'll also have a couple of people from FEW, including Julia Chambers. We'll be giving people personalized information on their own property and and give some suggestions as to what they can plant with that. A few is also having our native plant sale that's going on until the 22nd of this month. This year it is all online. I oversee that program, and we are, as I said, it's an online thing, but we have listed on our website at afew.org all kinds of information about the plants that are available. And with it being an online thing, I've got a couple of Google forms on there. So if you're interested in ordering, just quarts or gallons, we have a form for that. And there's over 80 different plant species that are available through that process. And then we also have another form that is for single species flats or for garden flats. So if you have an interest in ordering, let's say, a whole flat of 38 cardinal flower plants, that's an option for you, or the garden flats. We have 7 different garden flats that are available through the sale. And those will actually be, they're kind of a cool thing. I mean, my property, I have about 7 or 8 of them. And there's 38 plants in there, and they give you a full layout of how you should plant them as far as the design. So it kind of takes a lot of the, all the questions and stuff out of it. Makes it a much easier process. And then our big event of the year is our Earth Day celebration. This is getting ready to take place on the 22nd, which actually falls on Earth Day, unusually for us. And we've got a ton of stuff planned for that day. We're going to kick it off at 10 a.m. with a hike with Dave Dister. This event is actually taking place over at the United Methodist Church of Ludington. So they've got a really nice trail system that's behind the church itself. So he's going to be taking people on a hike there for that first hour. And then from 11 o'clock until 4 o'clock, we'll have a variety of presentations that'll be taking place. We'll have different informational booths. We have food that's going to be there. And also we're going to be doing some tours of You Dig It Community Garden, which merged with a few back in January of 22. Some of the presentations are that are going to be at the event. Actually, Vicki and Bree will be presenting. We also have Dave Dempsey that's going to be there, which I am actually reading his most recent book right now. He's a 9-time author and has just been an amazing environmentalist and spends a lot of time really focusing on the Great Lakes and the importance of saving them. And Julia is also the one who's got the Snakes Alive program coming in. So that's going to be something really cool for the kids. And I think that's just one of the many things that are going on for the children to keep them active throughout the day. But that's basically it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer anything. You can go ahead and drop me an email on that. At sarahb@afew.org. And once again, our website has all the details on not just these things that are taking place in April, but the stuff that we have going on for the rest of the season too, because we've got our beach sweeps and all kinds of activities happening on Afew. And that's about it. Unless you have any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Sarah or Afew, since Julia's on as well? Thank you, Sarah, as well as Julia, for all you do in terms of Afew and partnering with the city of Ludington. It's a great example of a partnership for the benefit of the broader community. There is Don Higgins posted a question for the group. Any thoughts on northern wild rice management? Not an invasive, but significant growth in the North Bayou the past 1 to 2 years of Hamlin Lake. Local homeowners looking into long-term treatments near shoreline, but limited in terms of area allowed to treat. So anyone want to try to take that? I don't know if
I just know from my partnership with the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians that they are concerned and in love with the wild rice. So even as far as European frogbit surveys, they wouldn't let us or Eagle, or they really didn't want anyone to do surveys in those areas because they don't trust us not to damage the wild rice. It's a cultural resource. So I think you're going to get some serious pushback. And if you have problems with the wild rice and you want to stay on good terms with people who care about it, I would definitely involve Alexis DeGabriel, who is the person in charge of basically managing those populations for the Little River Band in those plans, and make sure they're on board, or you're going to have some unhappy people.
Does anyone have any other questions, or I guess do the presenters have anything they want to comment on from any of the other presentations? This information has been great tonight. Thank you all for doing this. I wish there was more individuals that were participating, but we will, as I mentioned at the beginning, have the recording. But anything to add or any questions from anyone on?
I would ask, anyone on the Zoom call tonight, if you know of anyone who you think would do a great job with an AmeriCorps program or has an interest in it, send them our way. Like I said, I just got the approval this morning to reach out to see if we can find someone to fill another position. So someone who's self-motivated, someone who doesn't mind walking a lot of miles, and has an interest, and maybe someone that could use some help with college funding in the future.
And Jim mentioned in terms of the garlic mustard poll, a few is helping us promote that as well, but that is on Saturday, June 3rd from 10 to noon on Piney Ridge. And you can, we've asked people to register on the Friends website, just so in case there's a weather issue or whatever, we can get in touch with folks. So you can go to that. It's actually a Sign Up Genius that you'll be linked to. But thank you for your participation this evening. This has been very informative. And again, we'll make the video available if you know anyone that would benefit from watching it. So all of you have a good evening and enjoy the Michigan spring weather.